Welcome to the Growth Whisperers Podcast, where everything we talk about is about building enduring great companies. And there's something that both Brad and I get a kick out of, is seeing companies that continue to go and build for years, decades, generations in some cases, and seeing those businesses thrive over time. We just get a kick out of it, and that's why we like talking about it, sharing the things we learn, working from companies that are doing it, and even things we study from other experts that help companies in this path. So I'm Kevin Lawrence here in a place called Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada, actually in a small town outside of Kelowna called Peachland. And Brad is down in Perth, Australia. Brad, how's it going today?
It's going very good. I'm very interested in this conversation and just the thinking that you've had around this. And by all accounts, and I don't think it's just you, this has had quite a good resonance with audience, that audiences have really kind of got a lot out of this. So I'm quite interested to dig into it today.
Yeah, me too. I am.
So let's do that. Let's jump into it. So we thought we'd adopt a slightly different format today. Rather than just hear Kevin telling us about it, we thought that because it's Kevin's material, he's come up with it, and as I said, it's been quite successful with audiences. We thought what we'd do is I'd be asking Kevin questions about it and giving him the opportunity to explain the model and why it works. So look, we're always up for trying different things. Let's see if it works, and it could crash and burn, but hopefully we'll be able to get it through till the end.
It'll be good. It'll be good.
Yeah. So tell us, Kevin, what is the four forces of growth? What's the, why is it an issue? What is it?
Yeah. Well, it goes back, if I go back a few years, even pre-COVID, I started working on this and thinking about I've had a passion about what causes people to continue to grow and thrive in their careers. And that led to the book, Your Oxygen Mask First, and why some people burn and then some people thrive and other people burn out or bonk along the way. And I've got a similar interest in the same thing with companies. How is it that some CEOs continue to lead their companies to growth and others don't? And I've been fascinated by it. And I was thinking about it one day, and I, did a lot of did before a lot of traveling and flying on planes. I'm fascinated with airplanes. And, Your Oxygen Mask First came from airplanes. And I started going like, I know a little bit about flight, but what makes an airplane fly? Flying an airplane is hard. Leading a business is hard. And I stumbled onto the four forces of flight, which is what it is that actually makes an airplane fly. The forces a pilot has to work with and fight to make a plane get into the air, get altitude, and then stay in the air for a really, really long time. As you know, going back to the Wright brothers, who kind of got it going early, probably like about 100 years ago. And so I took the thinking of what makes a plane work to really what a CEO has to do to make a business work. And that's where the four forces of growth came into, really directly modeled against the four forces of flight.
Awesome. And so is there any chance potentially perhaps in the future that we may be blessed by another book from Kevin?
Yes. Yeah, I'm working on it. I'm just getting things prepared to start writing it next year. I'm collecting a bunch of data and information right now. And I'm testing the material in talks that I'm doing and with groups that I'm working with. And things that got my attention is, put a lot of time into building the model and simplifying the model, but it's really resonating with people in sessions. And I noticed, a company I was at recently, and, in two different meeting rooms, it's up on the whiteboards where the CEO has been driving it and using it in conversations. And, in our space, when you create a tool, that when people run with it on their own, that there's something there. And and the feedback I get. So yeah, it's my project for 2023.
Awesome. We should always all bear in mind it takes a year or even a couple of years to get a book out. But I'm excited to dig into these things. So why do you think that it's resonating with audiences?
One, it's simple. And two, they relate to it. They can see themselves in it.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to self-assess and place yourself in the model and see where you're at.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. That's good. And so, all right, let's jump into it. What are the four forces? Tell us what are the four forces and
Well,
why
I'll
do they
throw
matter?
it on screen for people that are able to see on YouTube. But basically, for planes, what pulls them up into the air is the lift of the wings. It's called lift is the force. And for us in business, that is opportunities. Where our heads lift up, we look at opportunities, possibilities, and things that we can do to capitalize on in a business. What takes the plane forward is courage, is thrust. And I call that courage in this model. So when you have opportunities, you're looking up at things that you can do and you have courage to act on them. That's where growth comes from. And it's only where growth comes from. Opportunities and courage creates growth.
Could I perhaps, sorry, Kev, could I perhaps just quickly interpret what I can see on the screen for those who don't have a screen?
Yes.
So we've got two lines. One is vertical and one is horizontal. At one end of the vertical line at the top is opportunities. The opposite end of that is problems. On the horizontal line, at one end on the right, we've got courage. And at the other end of that line, we've got fear. Would you like to elaborate on that for us, please?
Yeah, it's basically just like a simple 4-box type model. And so at the top is opportunities and forward is courage. And that's where growth is. Below that, which in airplane language is weight that pulls the plane down, or gravity in different versions of the model. Well, in our world, that's problems. That pulls our head down. We start looking at our toes and trying to fix stuff. So it's great. Solving problems is a really interesting and potentially dangerous thing for people. But when you're in problem solving mode and you have courage, you fix stuff and you improve stuff. And it's that I call that mode in model improvement. And your margins get better, your systems get better, there's less friction in the business, you get better profitability. It's all really, really good. But it's too good sometimes, and people can overinvest energy in improvement. And if you invest all of your energy in improvement, you'll get all kinds of quick wins and you will get efficiencies and improve your income statement and your balance sheet. But you won't necessarily get growth. So
I love accountants, but that would be like handing the reins over to the accountants to run the business. They're going to bring in new efficiencies. Yeah, right. Thanks.
So the idea is, like, for really successful businesses that continue to grow, they run a little loose. It's messy. And if you clean up all the problems, you won't have any time to focus on growth. And that's on the front end of the model is that CEOs and some execs need to spend quite a bit of time in the growth quadrant, but they often get pulled into the improvement quadrant. They often get pulled down into problems, and their egos feel good fixing those problems. And often many of them need to get fixed, and many of them don't. And many of them don't need the attention of the CEO. So for example, one CEO I work with who really got me thinking about some of these things years ago, he's like to his team, look, great. Hey, you let me know when you got any problems, and just when you got problems, come down to my office between 8 and 8:30 any morning. And that's problem time. And that's a great time to come and get your problem solved. He comes in at 9.
I knew that was coming.
Of course. And he says, though, but it says basically, I'm not interested in your problems. But if you got something you want to sell, you want something that now in this model, if it's in the growth quadrant, I'll stay up all night with you. I'll work with you day and night, and we'll sell. So it's selling a new product, a new service, to existing customers, or selling to a new customer, or expanding a customer into a different region.
Yeah.
So if you want to sell, and that's what growth, and this CEO was brilliant, is brilliant, but his business was not as profitable as it could have been.
Yeah.
He didn't put too much energy, he put enough energy into improvement in the org, but he kept a lot of energy on growth so they could grow. And so I call it, he ran it a little loose, a little fast, so it could grow.
Yeah.
Versus, and many naive executives, CEOs, leaders, managers put too much energy in improvement and under allocate resources to growth, And then they wonder why they don't grow. The problem is the decisions have a deferred impact. And you can pull all your resources down to improvement right now. You'll still get some growth if you have it, but it'll gradually fade. It's like gradually pulling back on the throttle of the plane. The nose will gradually come down. You might not even notice it.
But you're not growing. Yeah.
Well, the growth will start to fade. The engine is getting less and less fuel, and it will start to fade over time.
Yeah, I remember I took a call from a business owner. Gee, it would have been 5 or 6 years ago, and he'd said exactly to that to me. He had a $15 million business, and he said, "Brad, look, it's awesome. We handed over the reins to our CFO, and he's taken over and he's run it. It's been great for 4 or 5 years now. But the problem is we're more profitable in gross profit margin percent and dollars than we've ever been in our life, but we're not growing the top line." And it's doing our head in, because like we've got everything we always wanted in terms of the profitability, but as entrepreneurs, we know that we've got to keep growing.
Yep. And they most likely got focused too much on improving things. I've got one I worked with, and I remember at the time I was sick to my stomach. It was a family business that grew 50% year on year. And when they hit 50 million, it stopped. It plateaued.
Wow.
And so I'm meeting with them, and they called me in because they wanted some help to reignite the growth. And I'm talking to them, I'm like, well, how about customers? Oh, that part's a guarantee. They're like a tap. When we want more, we just turn it on. And I was like, okay. And these weren't arrogant people, but that was a very arrogant statement. Anyways, as we started to dig into it, they in their case lost sight of their customers. They got so internally focused, so much improvement focused, that they weren't listening to the customers. And the customers were a big source of referrals and their growth. And the customers were pissed off. So I said, hey, can I see the customer feedback? Oh yeah, for sure. Long story short, I got the feedback, and I was flying back, and I was on the plane reading through spreadsheets. It was paper, thick document, 30 lines a page, multiple pages. I got to page 3, and I was like a cartoon character with steam coming out of my ears. I was so angry. The customers were yelling and screaming off the page at me about a couple of core things. But basically, the customer said, screw you, and stopped referring and stopped expanding the business. And it was a referral-based business because they were pissed off about stuff. But the team was so internally focused. And I'm not judging them. They had a lot of reasons to be internally focused. But they took their eye off the growth. They weren't talking to the customers who were their growth engine.
Yeah.
And the growth stopped. They still had an okay, and it took them almost 3 years to get it back to growth again.
Yeah.
Like they really killed the engine. They basically landed the plane of growth, and they had to get the damn thing off the ground again. And it was unfortunate. Great learning for the CEO, but painful because they focused on the wrong things.
So there's 4 forces of growth. You've spoken about the intersection between opportunities and courage is growth. Yeah. You've spoken about courage and problems leads to improvement. So what about the other side of the ledger? What about where we get towards fear, and fear becomes a driver?
That is really dangerous, and I'll throw the model up for a second. And that's a real danger in the kind of economy that our world is going into. The more that fear goes in, some personalities slow down, and they really slow down, and they don't take as much action, and it can be really, really lethal.
Yeah.
And so if you're opportunity focused, but you're very fearful, it's analysis paralysis, right? You get stuck in analysis mode. And the truth is, when you read and see in the boardrooms again and again, you generally need to make decisions with somewhere between 70 and 80% information. You can't wait for 100% information. So you need to do analysis. Just at some point, it doesn't matter. It's too much, and the perfectionism gets in the way. The other is if you're fear-based and you focus on problems, well, that's agony. If you're fearful about problems, you're just going to loop and stress, and nothing good is going to come of it. This relates to ourselves personally as well as just within the business. And look, there's people's jobs like agony. That's the department of your chief legal officer or your chief compliance officer or your person that's in charge of legal compliance, all those things, and keeping us out of trouble. We need those people. And our analysis, that's the job of the CFO. And improvement, that's the job of the COO or your VP of ops or whatever it happens to be in lots of your executives. And obviously the growth is the CEO's job to spend most of their time.
Yeah.
So there's different roles in there. But the point of it is that you end up overweighting in certain areas. And that's the idea here, is that you have too much. And you might choose for your business to put a little bit more energy and analysis, but in this market, but do it consciously. I was talking to another CEO about this the other day. He's going, yeah, the challenge is, growth is critical, but in a challenging market, there's way more problems and way more fear. So you're pulled away from growth. So he goes, logic would say that it's twice as hard to grow in a challenging market. He goes, I think it's 4 times. Because it takes twice as much energy to get the same growth as you would in a booming market, in a challenging market. But you've got all this energy being pulled everywhere else. So he says, I think it takes 4 times the energy to stay in growth, to keep your hand on the throttle and the plane going up in a challenging market. And I think he's right. I think so the point of this model is it's just awareness for people to see, like at the end of the day. And I'll get some more data, but in the CEOs I've talked to so far, they generally believe that average number is about 60% of their time needs to be in the growth quadrant, 60. And I'm hearing different numbers from different execs, but it's well under 50 for an executive team on average in growth, but the CEO for sure about 60 at least.
Yeah.
And that's go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, so the CEO is in growth between opportunities and courage. A COO might be improvement, which is courage and problems. But the question is, how do I avoid analysis paralysis and agony, the things that are on the left-hand side of the model, which is between opportunities and fear and problems? How do I avoid those as a leader?
That's the CEO's job, is to get people to make decisions, to drive for decisions, right? And and we've talked about this in previous episodes, having the debates, making the decisions, saying, okay, let's go, right? That's the CEO's job, is to lead people to decisions. No different than in the previous episode, we talked about Elon Musk making some tough decisions and saying, let's do this.
With his acquisition of Twitter, yeah.
Correct. So it's about the CEO being in the right mindset and having the right team, but it's pushing for decisions.
Yeah.
When the fear kicks in, which it does, if the CEO gets fearful and scarce mindset, the whole organization's going to go that direction. So the CEO's got to keep up the courage and keep people more forward than backwards.
And that makes me think about the 20-mile march, okay, which is consistent, not too high, not too low, consistent growth in the right direction. And that's driven or led by the leader. Yeah.
And exactly. And the 20-mile march, lots of our companies that we're talking about that right now with the clients we work with.
Yeah.
And it requires a CEO that can be courageous. Interestingly, I came from a meeting this morning with one of my clients that we've done a lot of work on his balance sheet and really dialed in his balance sheet over the last year, so he can stay courageous. If you have a fragile balance sheet, you can't. It's like if you've got a steel-hulled boat with double layers of steel, you can go into some areas that might have some debris in the water and not worry about it, and maybe bang into a few icebergs.
Yeah.
If you've got a thin paper-hulled boat, a traditional Canadian canoe made of animal skin stretched over some branches, you're not going to go bounce against crazy sharp rocks and icebergs because it's going to rip.
It's not going to work.
So got to set yourself up with the structure and the resources to be courageous. And if we look at the research of courageous leaders, they're incredibly well prepared, well trained, and ready to go. Right. And that's why education, leadership, boards of advisors, experts, and strong balance sheet make it a hell of a lot easier to stay courageous, because you have choices and you know you're not going to kill the business.
I used to, I've still got a saying, and that is that if you have a strategy, but you're worried about making next week's payroll, the strategy, you might as well not even have it, right? Because no one cares about the strategy. No one cares about anything. It's everything always comes back to how do we make payroll? So you've got to have that, you've got to have that depth of balance sheet.
I love that. I was with a client a couple of weeks ago, and they're in a business that's going to get impacted in this economy. We know it, but we got a balance sheet that makes it not matter. Yeah. So it's like, most of our clients have balance sheets. It's like, okay, we don't like it, but bring it on. Like, we've got cash and access to cash to be able to weather pretty well any storm that is, including things like COVID, if it didn't go their way. And that's a lot of work to set themselves up to win. And this goes back to Collins's work in Great by Choice and productive paranoia. Right. And also just having incredibly, so again, all that stuff allows you to have courage, experience, experts. Go ahead.
Another question. What are the well-intentioned things that people do that hurt companies' growth in this four forces model?
Yeah. They go solve 75-cent problems. And they think that all problems should be solved. And they think that solving problems is a good use of their time. Yeah. It's all about solving problems. Like, at the end of the day, our job as leaders is to teach people to solve their own problems. We teach our children to tie their shoes at about 3, 4, 5 years old. Yeah. Like, we don't teach 15-year-old, we don't tie shoes for 15-year-old kids. I hope we don't. No. And in business, sometimes we have bad habits, because solving problems is so good for the ego. It makes us feel good. So getting too involved in problems, and I go back to the story of Sirius Aircraft in plane metaphor. I'm going to dig out the case, but when they were optimizing Sirius is famous for recreational aircraft that's got a parachute on the plane. And if things go weird, you pull the parachute. I shout out to Ethan Martin, another advisor and coach that you and I know out of the US. And Ethan got me to, I told him about my first flying experience when I took flying lessons. I didn't like it. He goes, "You were in the wrong plane." He goes, "You need to go fly a Sirius." He set it up. I went and test drove a Sirius. It was amazing. Loved it. But the main thing is, if you mess up, you pull the handle, the parachute thing drops, or parachute pops out, and you land the plane on the ground. You probably have to replace the landing gear because you probably break it, but that's about all you break. Yeah. So the point of it is that when they were optimizing Sirius, as they became more important, is they started solving problems that were $6,000. I think it started at $20,000, but then they went down to $6,000 a plane, and then $5,000, and then $4,000. They left all of the inefficiencies, because at that point, if they're burning 10, 20 grand a plane on $1 million plane, it's fine. Over time, they will get it, but they didn't waste time chasing 75% problems.
Okay, very good. So if you would, maybe just talk us through the key points, maybe just as we move to close out, just give us the key point summary to close out the four forces here.
Sure. Well, I mean, flying a plane like a well-trained pilot is very much like being a CEO or executive. There's so much to learn to be effective, particularly in turbulence. And it's counterintuitive to continue to stay in growth mode, just like it's counterintuitive to stay hard on the throttle and gain altitude in a crazy turbulent storm. It's just because it freaks people out. And so for effective CEOs, find ways to stay in growth mode, which is new revenues, adding new revenues into the system from new products, new services, new customers, new markets. That's the root of it. And keeping the right amount of energy in growth while you make sure the other areas are taken care of. But if you only take care of the other areas of analysis and agony and improvement, and you dedicate 5% of your energy into growth as a CEO, your growth will die in time. You need to keep enough, whatever's right for your business, in growth.
Very good. Thank you very much. 4 Forces of Growth. Look forward to that coming out sometime in the future. We want you to take the time to do it right, not quick. And I say that, probably on behalf of the audience, because there can be pressure to get it out quick. But it's been awesome to share the concept and get to understand the ideas and where it's heading, and I'm sure it'll evolve over time. So thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you. All right. So as we move to close, my name is Brad Giles. This is the Growth Whisperers, in case you hadn't picked that up yet. We talk about building enduring great companies. Of course, we've been speaking to Kevin Lawrence, my every week co-host. You can find me at evolutionpartners.com.au, and you can find Kevin at lawrenceandco.com. We both have interesting newsletters that we put out each week about all of these kind of subjects that may interest you if this is your cup of tea. And you can subscribe at our websites for those. Obviously, the YouTube version is available, maybe a bit more relevant for this episode because Kevin shared some slides in this episode. You can find that at YouTube, obviously, by searching the Growth Whisperers. And obviously subscribe and like where appropriate to keep getting updated. Hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Look forward to chatting to you again next week. Have a great week.